Hello, and welcome to our video on the complex factors that led some slaves to resist or be hesitant about the liberation movement. While we know that no slave actively desired or preferred slavery, there were many reasons why some slaves may have been reluctant to support the fight for freedom. In this video, we'll explore 10 possible reasons and discuss them in some detail. 1. Fear of retribution. One of the main reasons slaves resisted the liberation movement was because of the fear of retribution. Slaves who attempted to escape or rebel against their masters faced severe punishment, including being whipped, branded, or even killed. This fear of punishment made it difficult for some slaves to imagine a life beyond slavery. 2. Economic uncertainty. For some slaves, the prospect of losing their secure food, shelter, and clothing might have been daunting. While slavery was oppressive and inhumane, it provided some level of stability and predictability for slaves. Without slavery, some former slaves faced poverty and homelessness, which was a daunting prospect. 3. Lack of trust. Some slaves may have felt suspicious of abolitionists, especially if they were white. Slaves were wary of trusting white people who claimed to want to help them gain their freedom. This suspicion stemmed from the fact that white people had been instrumental in creating and perpetuating slavery in the first place. 4. Social isolation. Some slaves had formed connections with their fellow slaves and may have felt reluctant to leave them behind. This was particularly true for slaves who had formed close-knit communities with their peers, such as those who attended the same church or worked together in the same field. Leaving these relationships behind was a difficult prospect for some slaves. 5. Family separation. Slave families were frequently separated, sold, or forced to live apart. This was a particularly traumatic aspect of slavery, as it meant that many slaves had no control over their own families. The prospect of leaving behind loved ones was a daunting one for many slaves. 6. Loyalty to their masters. Some slaves may have felt a sense of loyalty to their masters, especially if they had been treated well. This loyalty stemmed from the fact that some slave owners did treat their slaves with a modicum of kindness and respect. This made it difficult for some slaves to imagine a life beyond slavery, where they would be forced to leave behind their masters and any positive relationships they had formed with them. 7. Lack of education. Slaves were often denied education, which could have limited their understanding of the liberation movement. This lack of education meant that many slaves were unaware of the broader social and political context of their oppression. This made it difficult for them to imagine a life beyond slavery or understand the fight for freedom. 8. Trauma. Many slaves experienced significant trauma, including physical and sexual abuse, which may have left them feeling powerless and disempowered. This trauma may have made it difficult for some slaves to imagine a life beyond slavery or to trust those who claimed to want to help them. 9. Religious beliefs. Some slaves may have been influenced by their religious beliefs, which emphasized the importance of obedience and submission to one's master. Slaves were often taught to view their bondage as part of God's plan, which made it difficult for them to imagine a life beyond slavery. 10. Lack of knowledge of the outside world. Finally, some slaves may have been unaware of the outside world and the possibility of a different life beyond slavery. This lack of knowledge meant that many slaves were unable to imagine a life beyond the conditions of their bondage. And that's it for our video on the 10 reasons some slaves resisted the liberation movement. We hope this video shed light on the complex and nuanced factors that influenced some slaves' decisions. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.